Well, we are live. Welcome to Environmental Justice Coalition meeting. We're going to give folks a chance to make their way in. If you're hearing me and you're a member of the EJC and the attendees list, just raise your hand and we'll make sure you get promoted. Thank you. See Min, you're out there. Tavi, you folks. Thank you. Welcome to folks that are joining. While we're waiting for people to get here, if you don't mind changing your name to identify yourself as an EJC Environmental Justice Coalition member, that would be great. If you need help, you can hover over the box that has your name. Gabriella, I know you'll do that when you get back to your screen since you're driving, but you can go click above and then the 3 ellipses will show up. You can go to rename. So as folks are, you can add it both, so Tavi, for you, if you want to say iUrban Team EJC, if you want to add pronouns, please feel free to do so. Just want to make sure that we're identifying ourselves correctly as the public engages. And again, for those, if you're an attendee on the EJC, will you please raise your hand so we make sure we're getting everybody in here. So welcome Anna, welcome Jude, welcome Amandra, Tavi, Min, good to see you. Paris, how you doing? Good to see you.
Doing well. How are y'all doing?
Monday afternoon, can't complain.
Okay, me too. A little yee, a little haw. That's how I feel on this Monday.
A little bit of yee, yeah. I'll give a little bit of haw.
Maybe a lot of haw.
A lot of haw, okay. Not too much yee, a lot of haw. I'll take it.
Good to see y'all then.
Yep. Yeah, we got you, Tavi. Thanks. So let's get. Oh, sorry, Amandra.
My bad. Sorry, I wanted to quickly mention that I'm going to be attending as an attendee today.
Good. We see you. We hear you. We're happy to have you. Paris, were you gonna jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I know that Jenna had emailed me and gotten Almendra added to all of the regular email updates from our team, but just moving forward, she's gonna be taking up our organization's spot in these meetings. So if you can just make a note to always advance her up to the panelist level, that'd be great. I appreciate y'all.
Great. Thank you. Okay, let's give 30 more seconds and we'll dive in. We got 3 hours together, so although we're pretty darn close. Let's do one last call. If you're in the audience and an EJC member, just raise your hand. Otherwise, let us begin our meeting together. So welcome, meeting number 4. My eyes are telling me the right thing on the screen. So welcome, folks. Good to see you again. As a reminder, Ben Duncan facilitating today. We'll do some broader introductions here in a second. So why don't we start with our EJC members? We'll go around the room if that's all right, and then we'll advance to some of our project team folks. So I'll just call on you as we move through. So Monica.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Zazueta. She, her pronouns. I am from the Vancouver Metro LULAC, Council number 47026. And si se puede, so let's do this together as a community and with love and light. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you. Paris.
Hey y'all, my name is Paris Nelson. I'm with Fourth Plan Forward, our Strategic Development and Policy Manager, and we are members of the EJC. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Paris. Tavi.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tavi Kale. I am a program coordinator with iUrban Teen and a member of the EJC. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Almanda.
Almendra Velasquez, Fourth Forward's Climate and Health Coordinator, also Environmental Justice Coalition member. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca. I'm the Executive Director of the Free Clinic of Southwest Washington, and we're also a member of the EJC.
Thanks, Rebecca. Gabriella, I know you're driving, but if you can come off mute.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Gabriela Mendoza Ewing. I am the Executive Director of Hispanic Disability Support of Southwest Washington, Pasitos Gigantes, and I am also a member of the EJC and the CAG. Thank you.
Thank you. Min?
My name is Min Pham, and I am the president of the Vietnamese community of Clark County, and also I'm a member of the EJC.
Awesome. Good to see you, Min. Josh?
Good afternoon, folks. Josh Jones, Program Director over at Partners in Careers and a member of the EJC.
Great, thank you. Anna?
Good afternoon, everyone. Ana Betancourt, she, her, ella. I am here representing Latino Leadership Northwest. Hope all of you are doing great. Thank you.
Thank you. Jude?
I'm representing the Farm and Food Justice Network on the EJC.
Thank you. Any other EJC members? Or should I get all the, oh, Levita is in, can we promote Levita? We'll have, if we can advance the slide too. I'm asking multiple things simultaneously. Oh, welcome. Let's keep going until we get to the staff list. Levita, do you want to say hello? Welcome.
I do want to say hello. I also have one of my colleagues who will be replacing, instead of me and Karen Morrison, Abby Hollapeter, who is out in the audience. So if I could also have her promoted to a panelist as well. She'll be working with our organization. She works with our organization, and she'll be taking part in these meetings a little bit more often since Karen's availability isn't quite up there. She's in New Orleans right now at a conference. So yeah, I'm here. My name is Levita Morrison. I'm with Odyssey World International Education Services.
Great, thank you. New Orleans, that's not a bad place to be. Alana?
Hi, sorry, I'm just hopping on. I had to rush from picking up my daughter from school. Hello, everybody. My name is Alana Tadella. I'm with the Pacific Islander Health Board of Washington here on the EJC.
Great, thanks. And don't apologize for picking up your daughter. I think she'd appreciate it. We appreciate you doing that. Laura, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late as well. I had to pick up my dog from the vet.
And who are you, Laura?
Oh, Laura Ellsworth, she, her pronouns, and I am with Council for the Homeless.
Great, thank you. And Abby, welcome. Want to introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, my name's Abby Hollapeter. I'm a part of Odyssey World. And as Levita said, I'll be joining these meetings more often to help out with the EJC part of things.
Great, thank you. And folks have mostly met the team, but I did want to pass it to Jenna. You'll see there's a new name on our list of folks on the staff side of the team, and then I'll just ask my colleagues to quickly wave with their roles. So Jenna, do you want to introduce your team and new folks?
Hi everyone. This is Jenna with Clark County. Nice to see you all today. I wanted to introduce you all to Harrison Houston. Harrison is a transportation planner here at the county, and he is joining us on the project team. Some of you may have met Gary Albrecht earlier on in the project, who has been a part of the project team, but he has a new and exciting job. So he's transitioning off the project, and we're bringing Harrison in. So you all will see Harrison sometimes, especially if we are talking about anything related to transportation. So thanks.
Thank you, Jenna. Welcome, Harrison. For other folks, Amy, if you want to give a wave, you all seen Amy before. Lauren, say hello, give a wave. Thank you too, and Jenna, of course. You all know Jenna, and then Nicole on our team. will be really supporting this process, and Grant, who, if you have technical issues, he'll be posting things in the chat, et cetera, helping to move the work forward. Tracy, give a wave, our fearless project manager, and then Dana, who you've met before and you'll hear again from later on in the agenda, has also joined with us. So did I get everyone on the EJC? Is there anybody who hasn't been recognized? I think we got everybody. Great, thank you. So let's keep going. I'll work through some of our logistics, housekeeping stuff, and then we'll just dive into our agenda. So today we have a couple conversations that are kind of building on the work that we've been doing together. One is to develop a draft of an equity lens that will be applied to the work that we're collectively doing and inform the broader climate element as it is developed and emerged. And we'll talk more deeply about kind of how and what that will look like over the course of this process. And then there was an initial brainstorm. I know you've heard from Dana, who laid out some of the hazards and impacts. And the community advisory group has done some work that we'll be reflecting back on, learning about, and having a chance to have kind of the first of several opportunities to influence resilience goal language. So that's kind of what we're really going to be walking out or coming out of this meeting, moving through. If we go to the next slide. So from an agenda standpoint, I don't know if we've talked about it yet, but we've built in some space per y'all's feedback on any announcements, just ensuring that we create a space also to be building community and capacity and connection with each other. So we'll talk a little bit more about kind of that structure and process as we go forward. As I mentioned, we'll have a good chunk of time to work through an equity lens, and hopefully folks had some time to sit with GARE, Government Alliance on Racial and Equity, or GARE's Racial Equity Toolkit as part of the meeting materials, but it was largely informed by that work. And then we'll take a break and then dive into and hear from Dana on the work and some of the folks that are also on the CAG, the Community Advisory Group, a discussion of resilience goals before then opening up for public comment, which I'll speak to here in a minute, and we'll get you out of here by 6:30. Any questions about our agenda today? Okay, not seeing any. We can keep moving. So just, I don't think we're new to electronic participation, but just helpful reminders as we spend our time together. You all are joined, the EJC members are joined as panelists, and members of the public as attendees. So for EJC members, it's helpful to stay on mute when you're not speaking, joining on video as much as you can and are comfortable doing so. We ask that you use the raise hand button to get in the queue for conversation. Of course, part of my role is also seeing faces, and if you come off mute, that's an indication that you're going to want to speak, but raise hand works really well. You can see the icon on the bottom of the screen. If you are on phone or need to join by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and you'll get in the queue. You can email Grant, as I mentioned earlier, and he waved to everybody. You can email Grant with any technical issues that you might have. We think most people have updated their name. If you haven't, please rename yourself. If you could add pronouns, that's helpful for us in referencing each other, and certainly identifying yourself as an EJC member, so folks who are joining from the public can differentiate kind of staff and EJC members. And of course, as always, we're here for 3 hours, so feel free to get up, move around, take care of yourself, ensure that you can be thriving as we do our work together. We can go to the next slide. And then I mentioned this already, so just the raise hand button, it's a hand icon at the bottom. We do have closed captioning enabled, so if that's helpful for your participation, you can, on the bottom of your screen, again, you can click on show captions or the CC and that will allow you to have captioning as we go through the conversation. Go next slide. And then just as we work to build community together and have productive, constructive space, we'll ask you to kind of really focus on the topics that we have in front of us. I know our team has done our best job to be intentional with our agendas and trying to focus the conversations that are going to be most productive to the collective work. We do want to share and provide some balance of speaking time. So, you know, I can help manage that, but I ask you all to help manage that as well. If you're a jump in first type of person, maybe take a breath, sit back for a second. It doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you, but just ensure that we're creating space that so everyone in this room can engage. Trying to bring things up as early as possible, and this will come up as we have our conversation later today. Just really trying to recognize where can we start having impact and input coming from you all, informed by the engagement and conversations that you all have in community, but bringing it early in the process to inform the process. Issues and questions, right? We want to focus on the substance as much as possible. And we're here to learn together. There's the old expression, lift as you climb, right? Let's give the gift of our expertise and sharing as we do our work together. Seek to learn and understand each other's perspectives. Right? We can have debate, we can disagree, but ask that you really reflect and listen to learn and not just to respond. I won't define respect for you. I think we all know what it looks like and feels like, but really pushing you all to maintain, and you all have done a great job of this already, of maintaining a respectful space that we get to have together. And then in the chat, and of course, that includes, you know, respect in the way we both verbally and through written communication communicate with each other. We don't want the chat to be a side conversation, so it's helpful for sharing resources. Certainly, it's helpful for folks as a matter of process, but the conversation in the room is going to be what's most valuable to this space and certainly most accessible to those who may engage in the conversation through the lens of the public. Any questions or thoughts, reflections on discussion guidelines? Not seeing any. You all have been great. We've had some wonderful conversations, and I expect that to continue. You can go next slide. And then for the public, if you are here as a public member, again, you are as an attendee, which means that you otherwise will not be engaging with the EJC, though we do have space carved out towards the ends of our meeting for public comment. That period is scheduled from 6:10 to 6:20. It's welcome. We appreciate it. We will have this at every meeting, though the focus is on EJC discussion. So if you are interested in here and interested in providing public comment, if you raise your hand now, we'll make sure that we make a note for you when the time comes to provide that public comment. I will also ask for that when we get to that space. You also, outside of the public comment period in this meeting, can provide written input by emailing the comp.plan@clark.wa.gov or submit a comment online. And I won't read the whole thing, but we will put it in the chat. It's on the slide through the community plan comments section on the website. So if you are in the public and would like to get in the queue now, please raise your hand and we'll make a note. Otherwise, I will repeat this ask as we get to that space in our agenda. Next slide. So one of the things that we do in each of our meetings, we shared a meeting summary with you from our last conversation. I would ask if there was any edits or corrections that we need to make to the meeting 3 agenda. Want to create some space if folks had any reflection, feedback for changes. If none, if I could just get a thumbs up, raise hand, aye, some method of approval, that would be wonderful. I love it, Monica. Thank you for exuberant approval. Seeing all the hands, okay, good. It's also good practice for raising your hand. We will consider the meeting 3 summary approved. Thanks, everybody. Next slide. Jenna, I'm going to pass it to you, I believe, for the project updates from the team.
All right. So I'm going to run through my list of updates. Some of them are logistical, some are more substantive, so bear with me. First is I want to remind those of you who have not completed the open government training yet, this is your reminder to do so before the end of May. What I will do over the next couple of weeks is I'm going to review who I've received. We get a receipt when you've taken it, so I will follow up with those of you who have not done it yet just to make sure that is on your radar. Next is in your meeting materials, we're continuing to provide copies of public comments we received since your last meeting. So there were a handful of those in there. Sometimes they trickle in, so like we had a couple more come in, I think, since we initially posted last week. So our process is just to keep updating that document up until the meeting, and then we'll start over for your next batch of meeting materials. So there's a couple of comments in there for you to take a look at. And then also at the last meeting, I think we mentioned that we were interested in trying to figure out a way to share with you all feedback we receive from other EJC members in between meetings. And so our proposed approach is to create a new meeting material with each of your meeting packets that's just a compilation of any, sorry, my computer is doing something weird. Okay, so our planned approach is to compile any EJC member feedback since the last meeting and post it as a meeting material, so you all can then see what each other has been sharing with us. And just as an example, Monica, I hope it's okay if I put you on the spot.
Please,
Monica
yes, please.
loves to send staff examples of things she would like to see in Clark County. And so I think if we were to compile all the feedback to date, it would pretty much all be from Monica. Just so you all know, ideas like that are basically suggestions related to this project. This wouldn't include questions about your invoices or work plans or things like that, right? Just something that is a comment, right, on the project, or maybe feedback on something we were discussing in a meeting that comes in afterwards. So just wanted to let you know that that's what we're going to try moving forward. Okay, next on my list is about survey questions. So thank you all again for the conversation at last month's meeting. It was really helpful to further revise those questions. And we felt very rushed through that process. So we've been trying to draft the questions for the rest of the future phases of the project. So we think we can have those ready pretty soon to share out with you all. If you want to do just an initial cursory review, send any feedback back to us, then we can revise again and then bring them back at future meetings so we have a few more touch points. So you'll see in roughly the next week or so, we'll share out sort of additional questions for you to give us feedback on. We'll give you a due date before your next meeting so that we can then bring back at least the phase 2 questions at the next meeting, if that makes sense. So just keep an eye out for an email from us with additional questions to review. And of course, time you spend doing that can be invoiced to us. Let's see. I also wanted to share quick updates on the other advisory groups involved in the project. So later today, we're going to be talking about some goals for the resilience part of this work. So the CAG at their last meeting started brainstorming some ideas around that. And so you'll hear more about that later in today's meeting. And then our partner agency team, which is our team of like other county people and other folks who work in agencies in the area, they are currently helping those of us at the county do some technical review. We've gotten a lot of, we have a lot of information from Dana's team on a lot of the resilience, what the resilience data says about Clark County. So we've got a bunch of people behind the scenes reviewing it, making sure it makes sense, and asking Dana's team a lot of questions, just to make sure we're being really thorough on the sort of technical work related to this. Okay, sorry, 2 more things, then I'm done. So one is, I think as you all know, this climate work it's part of the county's larger comprehensive plan project. And I just wanted to share that in late May, so May 28th, 29th, and 30th, there is going to be a comprehensive plan environmental impact statement scoping open houses. So end of May. So there'll be information that'll come out in news releases that you all will see. If you have any questions about the comprehensive planning process itself, please feel free to reach out. Happy to talk more about that. But some climate change stuff does intersect our environmental impact statement work. So anyway, that's just announcement that's coming up. And then finally, just wanted to share that it is election season, and there's a county policy that those of us on staff and people who are part of groups like this, we can't talk political activities as part of our time together. So you can do that on your own time, outside these meetings, but we just can't talk anything elections or ballot related as part of this group. So that's what I've got. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jenna. Any questions for Jenna?
Yes.
Seeing any? No, Monica, jump in. Sorry.
So for the saying that we could put the hours for the reading material, that if we make suggestions and everything and read all that material, is that every month that we can do that? If we like get information from you in email, we can say, okay, we spent like 30 minutes reviewing the things that you sent us. Can we do that every month or no?
So it fits in there's like hours for like prepping for meetings.
Yeah.
I think I would basically put it in that bucket.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
And if you have questions on like how much time, send Amy, Lauren, and I a note, and we can help you estimate like how much money there essentially is to pay, for the amount of time.
Yeah,
There's a little bit of a limit.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And then I'll send another email because it's like I didn't put that on my last one, and so I was like, oh no. So yeah, I'll coordinate that with later. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And then any other questions for Jenna and team? Okay, and just before we keep going, we had a couple folks join since we did introductions. Trish, I saw you in there. Trish, you want to say hello?
Sorry, it takes me so long to find the buttons, man. There's so much. Hello, and I'm here and looking forward to a fun meeting. I wrote a list of things I would like to share at some point, so hello.
Hello. Well, we look forward to that list of things you're ready to share, Trish. We'll and just let us know if it doesn't come naturally. Just remind me about that. And then Danya.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danya Otto, ED for Sakura 39ers Youth Association. She, her pronouns. Yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
Great, thank you. And then is Lika.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lika Smith, the ED for Pacific Islander Health Board, and I think this is my first group meeting. So nice to see everyone.
It's great to have you. Thanks for joining. So thanks, Jenna, for providing those updates. Let's move to the next slide. I'd mentioned this earlier, and in light of, again, like this is not announcements for like a campaign rally, right? We're separating the political advocacy piece, but did want to create some space if there was, I think there was a couple examples that had come up earlier, grant funding opportunities. If you all wanted to announce some of the work you're doing that you're interested in having folks potentially support or collaborate or join or just be aware of. So just wanted to create this space on every one of our agendas to make sure that there's stuff happening in community that you want your fellow EJC members or the public, and for that matter, to know about. This is a chance to raise that. So why don't I just open the floor? If there's any announcements that folks want to make, we'll create a little space for it.
I would love to. I just need to get one of the flyers out so people can see it. So if anyone else wants to go before me, they can.
Paris, you came on video. Does that as an indication?
Yes. Hey y'all, I am happy to add something here, and just real quick to the project team, thank you so much for creating this space. I really appreciate it. It's a quick turnaround for the feedback that we gave you all, so hats off. I think this is something that Jenna has shared with our different groups over email before, but I know a lot of other organizations in town are looking to apply to the Washington Commerce public participation grants, which is, similar flavored to what we're doing here today, engaged in public engagement works to help to some end for comprehensive planning or what have you. So if any of your organizations are interested, I know of the ones that I'm collaborating with to write partner sort of submissions for it, but it's a good chunk of money to do engagement work that you might already be tapped for once it all comes down the line anyway. So if you want to collab with anyone, just feel free to drop me a line. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Paris. Monica, you got your flyer? We can't hear you though, Monica. We still can't hear.
There we go. Can you hear
There
me
we
now?
go. Yep, we got you.
All right, I got the flyer and I also got it in 3 different languages. So we got the English one, the Spanish one, and then the Chuukese one. I will be handing these out all over town to, what is it called? Grocery stores, to libraries, to schools. Thank you so much to Amy. I'm gonna cry. Amy is such a big help in this. Oh my gosh. If it wasn't for Amy, I don't know what I would have done. She's a piece of the puzzle, and this is a community effort, and I thank you so much. Of course. So on it, it's the Collaboration, Connection, and Caring event. It's May 25th, July 20th, and September 7th, and they're all Saturdays, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Fourth Plain Community Commons. And there's the address right there. There will be translation in Spanish and Chuukese. And my contact information is at the bottom right there for anyone who has any questions. But the activities is, the first one is Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Healing Circle, where we're all going to sit in a circle and we're going to talk about racism. We're going to talk about what we see in our community, the policies that we see that are inhibiting us from growing and thriving. And we're also going to be talking about what's been done to us and also what judgments we've made on other people. Then after that, it's going to be the introduction to donut economics, where every human being can thrive within the means of our planetary boundaries. And then after that, and we're going to be creating this circle too with our bodies. After that is going to be create through art or fill out surveys for community input on climate policies. So I'm going to have paint, chalk, markers, crayons, everything, so you can create what you want to see in our community. Or you're going to have the option to do the survey that the community provided. And then during the create through art or doing the policy, there's going to be free food, music, and dancing. So I will send this out via email so it can get shared out to the broader group. And then I also would love this to be shared with our county council members as well. I already shared it out with our city council members. So yeah, be on the lookout. I hope you all can make it. And yeah, it's going to be great. I've been telling everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Lavita? Unmute. There you go. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So let me lower my hand. We had our women's supporting women's friendship tea on the 27th or 26th of April, anyways, last Saturday, or the Saturday before last, and it went really well. We were able to have a survey corner, which Paris and I joined forces on, and offering surveys. We were able to get like 21 completed surveys. We did kind of alter some of the questions because it was a digital format, but I think it went over really well, and I was just very excited to be able to do that. Also, we have the Juneteenth Freedom Celebration coming up. We still have quite a few vendor spots available for some of your organizations. It will take place on June 15th. So if you're interested in having a location for your organization, please visit our website for gfcvancouver.org. And in addition to that, we'll be doing surveys there, and we'll also do signups for some of our other activities. One other activity that we're doing is the Clark County Women's Health Equity Study, which is a listening session. We're working with Swatch and a couple other organizations to create listening sessions that are facilitated by community health workers. Abby is part of that, and it's very similar in how we are getting feedback about some of the issues that are causing barriers to women's health. So we'd like to send out some information in case you have women who are interested in being a part of those discussions. We will be offering some online, which are going to be held through a platform that is completely anonymous. And then we also will have some other opportunities that are not so anonymous. I think that will be in person. And if there are people who would like to meet in person, like do like an interview, then we'd like to collect some of the qualitative information about what are perceived healthcare disparities for different groups of women of color within Clark County. And it kind of overlaps with slightly with just also looking at some of the things that are caused by like severe weather and climate and the impacts on health. So we brought Abby on mainly because she'll be sending a lot of invitations to your organizations to invite more women. And also we brought Abby onto this so that she could meet you all and kind of get a feel of what it looks like to do community engagement in another area.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Levita. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Paris. Any other announcements? That's great. Well, we will create this space at every one of our agendas going forward. Paris, I appreciate your appreciation. And that's an ongoing offer, right? If there's things that we can do to structure this space that's going to help you all connect better, or to build capacity and share the wonderful work that is happening in our communities, or anything that's going to help you thrive in this coalition, let's keep naming it. Give us that feedback, and we'll certainly do our best to reflect back and design based on your needs. So last call for announcements. Okay, well, let's move it. Oh,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, Gabriela, jump in.
Sorry, my internet is coming in now. I couldn't unmute before. I just want to share that tomorrow the Hispanic Disability Support of Southwest Washington, Pasitos Gigantes, is hosting a mother's event for mothers, grandmothers, and caregivers of children of all ages with IDD. And the conversation and survey for the EJC is going to be going on tomorrow and afterwards, because we have so many people attending that we won't have enough hands on deck to take all the applications. But that will be happening tomorrow and throughout probably the next couple of weeks, just to finish taking all those surveys from that event. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Gabriela, for jumping in and doing that great work. Okay, now last call for our announcements. Awesome. Well, let's keep going. Let's move into first part of our kind of substantive content for today. And you can go to the next slide. You know, one of the goals and opportunities that we have in this process is to create an equity lens for this process, an equity environmental justice lens, using the language of this group, and certainly from the guidance that's come out of Commerce. And you know, I will say, just as a matter of my own background, you know, part of my earlier work, and really want to sing the praises of my former colleague, my friend and sister in the work, Sonali Balaji, who was the lead author of Multnomah County's Equity and Empowerment Lens, which is a tool I had the great privilege of being a part of early development in 2010 through 2012, which was also, along with Seattle's Office Race and Social Justice Initiative, the precursor to what then became the Governing Alliance on Racial Equity. So a small group of local jurisdictions who were working to try to create a national movement of government that were seeking to advance racial equity and identify and dismantle racial disparities that showed up across all of these different measures that every jurisdiction in this country more or less experiences. And so when we think about and why we introduced Governing Alliance for Racial Equity, what was a small group of local jurisdictions is now over 400 something jurisdictions who have engaged in this work. This is a toolkit that has been adapted and modified and applied to all kinds of different bodies of work. And at its core, right, when we talk about kind of why and how we may use a tool like an equity lens, I wanted to introduce some concepts that are really important to hold as we move through the work together. One is that we use it, and we'll get into some of the draft questions that we're asking for feedback on, as a discussion tool and as a guide for how we can think about and apply and practice. And as my Sonali used to say, how do we embody equity work, right, as we engage in this process of goal and policy and strategy development, that we're really looking to improve, right, through a quality improvement framework, right, to say, how can we do better, recognizing that the institutional, systemic, and structural challenges that all of us are working and living and attempting to thrive within, how do we look to improve upon the way that we do our work, the way that we design policies, the ways that we execute in the world. Most importantly, it's a way to diagnose and provide a tool for analysis of benefit and burden, right? Who is harmed by policies, by practice, by process, who's included, who's excluded in the work that we do. And so much of what the EJ Coalition is about, right, is ensuring that those that we're bringing people in, right, into our processes, into our practice, through the lens of environmental justice, through direct community engagement, through deep relationship and connection. And it's an opportunity to mitigate where harm might exist, right? So identifying where can we make improvements in all of these different steps of our process, with a core goal of eliminating systemic inequities. And while the GARE model is explicit to racial equity, what we're challenging, I think, through this process and with the wisdom and expertise and diversity of communities that you all work with, holding and centering racial equity, because racism is such a powerful impact on how our systems and structures operate, but recognizing that we're really looking at systemic inequities across the board. So as you all are engaging in this and thinking about the different ways that your multiple different communities are intersecting, in this case with climate hazard and climate risk and climate resilience, just looking at it through that systemic lens and eliminating barriers, right? And reinforcing best practices. So a lot of times, I think when we talk about equity and inequities, we focus on the negative and really want to remind ourselves, as you all gave some illustration to, there's incredible strength and incredible assets in our communities. And so we're not just going to talk about it through the lens of harm, we're also going to talk about the lens of possibility, right? So just holding, right, these are underlying concepts that inform this tool. We go to the next slide. And so what we wanted to do is introduce a few fundamental questions building from GARE's toolkit. And again, this is informed both by GARE, by some of the other work that I've engaged with. And there's a lot of these type of models around the country that have been developed, all with more or less the same core concepts that underlie it. And so what we wanted to do today is have a conversation with you all about, you know, how can we give this gift to this process, right? Acknowledging that in order to make this real, right? Needs to be applied by you all, right? The community advisory group, the CAG is going to be touching it, right? Clark County staff, right? There's a lot of elements of how this tool, whatever set of questions we land on to advise this overall process, that's what we're going to ask you to do. So I'm going to ask us as we have this conversation around some of these fundamental questions and what's missing and what should we add, and does this really get to the heart of what we're trying to ensure we're not replicating or ensure that we're considering or analyzing when we do this work, right? That we're also holding, right? Not making it so complicated that people can't engage with it, not making it so long and thorough that we don't have the time to meaningfully interact with the questions, but also making sure that we are not missing fundamental and critical ideas, concepts, questions, or reflections that are going to be important to make sure that we're not replicating harm. We're not putting forward policies that will not benefit the communities that each of you live in, experience, and represent on this council. So fundamentally, there's kind of these three large areas of focus, right? One is around impact, right? So we are proposing that one of the questions that we use across this process and are going to ask you all to reflect back on is around who is most impacted. And this could be an issue, a decision, a policy, a strategy, both positively and negatively, right? Really trying to understand impact and understand it through a very broad definition of who and how, right? So what we're asking as we think about any particular policy idea or strategy or decision or issue is that we're thinking about both, all of the above, right? The physical, environmental, social, cultural, mental health, spiritual impact, right? Trying to build a big circle of concern that recognizes that human impact can show up in lots of different ways. And we want to make sure that we've named that so we're being really expansive in our analysis. We also, as one of my mentors and inspirators, I don't know if that's a word, someone who inspires me, John Powell, talks about how our community is differently situated. He says, we need to intimately understand the reality of people's lives in relationship to the social fabric in order to actually design strategies that will work for those populations. So when I think about the groups and the folks and communities that you all represent, we asked this question about how people are differently situated in terms of those barriers. We need to understand the distinction between one community and another and what unique challenges they experience. Because if we don't understand that, if we don't analyze it, it's impossible for then us to develop strategies or policies or goals that are going to actually work across all of our communities, right? So we can dive into that concept more, but that's what that question's trying to get at. What is it about that lived experience that's creating this barrier to thriving or this barrier to wellness or health or, fill in the blank? So that's the kind of first big question. The second big bucket is around data, and that's both qualitative and quantitative. Certainly, we've just had conversations about survey analysis, interviews, focus groups, healing circles. There's lots of ways, right, particularly in the relationship of you all to do community engagement around what is the data telling us. So particularly, we want to understand, are there geographic or are there specific communities that have impacts that we need to name, that the data should tell us? And that doesn't mean that it's all going to be quantitative. Sometimes it's really through storytelling and through that lived experience lens that we understand. Importantly, we also want to make sure that as you all do your work, right, that we are including community input and the priorities of community. One of the old adages for environmental justice is that communities that speak for themselves best protect themselves. Right? So ensuring that when we think about community input and community priorities, that we can crosswalk that with what we're putting forward, right? As an EJC, as a CAG, as Clark County, ultimately, adopted by county council, right? So the second bucket, what's the information that's informing this? What's the data tell us? And then the third piece how can we make it better, right? Or how can we, either through lifting up the positive attributes and impacts to community, or by really being specific about understanding and reducing the negative effects. When I pause, will you give me a preview of the next slide? I forgot. Sorry, team. I don't have the slides. Right. Okay, so we're going to have a conversation. Let's go back up. So I want to just pause, and because you all had the materials, so I just want to see if there's any questions or reflections, anything that's coming up to you as either I've just kind of laid out those three big buckets, because the next exercise is going to be like, is this enough? And what else do we need to name, or how else do we want to name it, so we can ensure that we have a process and a tool that we can collectively apply. So I'm going to pause, and I talked at you, so reflections, comments, questions. Okay. Now, as facilitators just tell you, you're supposed to wait like 10 seconds after you ask a question, and it always feels like a long time when you're online. Monica?
I'm wrapping my head around it, you know, and trying to put my thoughts in order and everything. So I've been writing things down and everything. So excited to dive into this. Thank you for laying this out. It's just a really big issue. I mean, getting rid of the false belief of hierarchy of human value, you know, that's been embedded into our culture for so long, and it's a process and a journey for each person individually, because we all live separate lives, but we're all fundamentally interconnected. So I'm very excited to delve into this and be the energy for this change. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. Yeah, and Lika, I see your comments. So let's go to the next slide, and let me talk about a little bit about the process that I'm hoping to use. So the short answer is yes. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to kind of the next step on this, is that we're going to take everything that comes out of this conversation and anything that you share after this meeting that can help inform the next draft that we come with, right? So right now, those are the questions that we kind of put forward, but we are asking for input, right? And particularly input through these three questions that we have. If we were to ask those questions, would that be enough to help us account for the impacts to our most vulnerable populations?
Yeah,
we were
that for me, for the Pacific Islander community, me specifically, it's a very emotional issue. You know, when I think of climate impact, I think of, it always makes me cry, because I think of our people that are becoming climate refugees, you know, and governments having to create a digital format so that they can continue to exist. So that question makes me get emotional first, and so I need time to process it, is why I was asking.
That's 100%, Lika. Thank you for just naming it in the way that you did. So I'm going to make folks jump up and down between the slides. If you go back up, one of the things, Lika, that I hear, and what we were hoping to account for in that first set of questions, if you're talking to Pacific Islander communities about climate change, as Lika just volunteered, I think really powerfully, thinking about the social, cultural, spiritual, mental health, how does that land, right? And Lika, you just gave us that illustration as an individual, but speaking right broadly about community. If we're having conversations about policy absent of an acknowledgement that that conversation itself can cause emotion, can result in trauma, re-traumatization, deep and powerful spiritual, cultural, physical, mental health impacts, right? Then we have to think about that. How do we have that conversation? It's part of why it's so important that we have folks like you that have that deep expertise and knowledge, right? To be able to name, right, and understand, like, this should also shape not just our policies, but as you all do your work, as we think about engagement, making sure we're doing it in a way that is sensitive to those impacts, right? So Lika, just thank you for just kind of naming it so clearly, and asking for what's going to work for you in terms of processing time and being able to contribute in other ways. Okay, let's go back to the other slide. Because there's, can we go to the discussion questions? Oops. So this is what we want you all to reflect on, right? So these are high-level questions that I provided. The Racial Equity Toolkit has a number of different steps and processes. And there's three kind of pieces I'd love to get some feedback on. And if you have specific questions like, why aren't we asking this? Or if we asked this way, this is how we could uncover even more information. Or that question doesn't seem to align with my community's impacts. Whatever that is for you, we want to understand, do they help us analyze impacts to vulnerable populations? Are we asking enough? And that particularly who's impacted and how, and why are they impacted in the ways they are? Is that enough to help inform us? Does it help us avoid worsening localized impacts, right? When we ask about geographic impacts or specific demographic impacts, we look at maps and data, does that get us far enough? And then the third question, does it help ensure that we have utilized community input, right? We have that question around like, is this aligned with what community wants, right? Community speaking for themselves. So those are the three questions we want you to reflect on. Let's go back up to the questions so you can see them. And Gabriela, please jump in.
Yes, thank you. I'm listening to the questions, and the very first thing that I can think of for the community that we support, this is a hard conversation due to the multiple layers of how the weather, one way or the other, will impact them and their children. For one side, the mental health, because if it's like a smoky season, trying to stay indoors when the weather is sunny and probably vacation time for children, and that they cannot go out and just spend some energy outside. And many of these families already have a hard time having their children to socialize with peers and do things outdoors. So that's one part. And then for the other is the financial impact, because if it's during the hot or cold weather, the use of energy and how are they going to pay for it? How are they, if they are even going to be able to go to work to pay for those bills? And how are they going to budget the increase on their electric bill? And we have so many places here in Clark County where the landlords don't even allow to have a window unit. It has to be like a newer unit. And if they don't have the opportunity to buy a unit that connects only like the hose to the window instead of the old unit that they have that hangs on the windowsill, and they don't have a way to relieve their home from the excessive heat with a unit that they can put in the window because they don't have the money to buy the other one, you know what I'm saying? And then the increased cost of the electricity. And so it is a tough conversation. And sometimes families are a little reluctant to even convey that. And we have in our culture something that we call it we're too macho, even women, like, oh, I can deal with anything. I'll just solve the problem. But at the end, it causes more trauma and more trouble for themselves and their families. So I hope that brings a little bit of light what happens with these families. And also many of these children have asthma. So that's another thing. I had so many families reaching out to me when like the smoky season and they could not even afford to buy the extra inhaler or to pay the extra medication because it was too much for their budget. So I just want to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriela. And I think where you started too, like these can be hard conversations. There's a couple of things that I captured that I'm interpreting as potential things that we could add that would strengthen this. One is we should be also adding financial, right? So considering the financial impacts, and I think you gave some really good examples. The other one is around power and building capacity, and you'll see this in some tools. Your landlord example, right? Just feeling like, is this actually going to build, maybe it's not saying power, but building the capacity of people to kind of solve for themselves, right? Or advocate and speak up for things that they need. And then the third one that I think you named, and Lika, you alluded to as well, is will this traumatize or re-traumatize people, right? And I think I heard all three of those things and the way you brought that forward. So I think it was Lika, then Paris, then Monica. Lika?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo Gabriella's statement. She said it beautifully. Our community too is from economically challenged communities, and so we can't mitigate the impacts of climate change financially. And so I think we need to be aware of that our communities suffer more because of where they live and the challenges they have with finances.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Lika, for building on that piece. So I'm hearing really loud and clear, right? Adding financial as part of the consideration. And when you think about how communities are differently situated and barriers, right? Your comment of not being able to solve it financially is a powerful comment, right? And one of the ways that you need to understand, right? Like if you have strategies that require fiscal investment, that's not going to work, right? I mean, that's just an example. Paris and then Monica.
Hey, I appreciate this question, and I'm just chewing over it because I had reviewed ahead of time, but I didn't see this particular slide, so I'm like processing it with what I had read. But one of the things that stands out to me that could be added is a question of what is the historical context around this particular issue. I think that we learn a lot when we look at the historical context of say like housing zoning, right? And what that's done 20 years, 50 years plus later to different regions of our community and across the nation. So the thing to when we ask ourselves if we're assessing, policies that we're going to speak about, I think it's important to assess the historical context of that, what inequities that historical context may have fostered in a community. What sort of precedent of discrimination perhaps has been laced in those historical context pieces or lack thereof could be important as we look to assess. Another goes down to what does the data tell us? I would also ask the data, who was this data from? Like who was involved in this data? And making sure that we involve communities of color, communities that are most marginalized in every way we can. I know that this effort, EJC, is that, but where possible, when we're assessing impact data, because this will do that, can we learn if that has been connected to those particular populations? Or are we just getting these aggregate types of data points from who knows where? But is there any way that we can bring some of those specific data points to localized community or population groups that we're seeking to represent and include in the process? And if they haven't been, if there weren't those groups involved in some of those data efforts, then maybe that's a sign that there should be. That's all I've got for right now, but just in general, I keep hearing a through line of harm, of the need of rehealing or of healing for community. And I don't know how we could fit it, but I would make some sort of ask about like the moving forward for communities and how they get to honor and express that harm, and also take ownership of it as well, as is a unique area that we could be in with this policy work, is sort of like a community healing experience through policy. I don't know what that would look like. I guess that's what our jobs are to figure out, but these are just some of my musings as y'all were speaking.
No, that's beautiful. And I think that is part of our collective opportunity, right? Is how do you both provide some redress by understanding historical context and harm that has occurred, and how do you imagine possibility of healing and redress from harm, right, in a future through the lens of policy. So I appreciate that, Paris. And I also just naming the history, naming kind of data justice and and what data are we looking at and giving ownership, giving, validation to, and really considering what is that data, where to come from, whose data, and of course, not forgetting, right? Part of that data input should be informed in large part by the work that you all are doing to get and bring community voice into the process. Thank you for all of that. Monica, jump in.
So I'm getting emotional through this because this is been a lifelong journey of just hating myself as a Hispanic woman as a child, because I just thought I was ugly. I thought my culture was bad because you saw white everywhere, white privilege, and just you knew that we were less than because that's what they said. And so years and years of hating myself and addiction and self-harm and not wanting to be here anymore, and having to go to having the strength to encourage to go get help. That took so much because you're supposed to figure it out. You're supposed to know. You're not supposed to have any problems. I mean, there's this thing, the stigma of mental health, and you're not supposed to have anything wrong with you. And so having that fear that people are going to judge you, and already people don't like you because you're a different race than white, and just doing all that in the work of counseling and keeping on going back to counseling because you don't want to tell the counselor all your issues, because what if they, report you or something or whatever, having to go to inpatient, outpatient, and keeping on because you know that there's something wrong. There's something wrong, and you think it's you, but it's the system. It's the system that we were born into, and knowing that loving yourself is where it all begins, but that takes so much strength when the world around you is telling you that you're less than. And so this is a healing journey for me, and it's amazing that it's coming finally after all these years. But part of it is, I want to read something. A part of healing is understanding the role one has played or one's ancestors have played in designing systems, benefiting from them or being harmed by them. A productive process in which each individual feels acknowledged gives everyone that has been impacted by oppressive structures or designed or contributed to upholding such structures opportunities to tell their stories and share the emotions of anger, rage, pain, fear, frustration that have animated their behavior. The only requirement is that everyone must tell his or her story with deep integrity and listen with respect to stories of others. An analysis of the cost of racism to the entire community and the benefits of eradicating it can help create a more positive atmosphere over time and deepen the understanding that our destinies are tied together. This process is essential to building deep trust, which is essential to working effectively for change. And so I think everyone, this is a very emotional thing. I mean, these are our feelings, these are our lives, and these is our community. And it's knowing that we deserve to be here and our voice matters, and reaching out to the communities, and that means everyone. From even my kiddo Rufio, to all the way to the oldest person in Clark County. Like every single human being is beautiful, and we all need to just really give that energy out there and plant those seeds. So thank you.
Yeah, I love it. And thank you, Monica. I mean, you're not the first to name the emotionality of what this means, and not, what I want to acknowledge, well, there just feels like some words on a page and we say it's a tool for analysis. It brings up exactly what we're seeing right now. And I think that's part of the power, right? It's part of being able to name and process and move through that emotion with the hope that we're creating something that can live more beautifully right? That's really connected to all that you just described. So thank you for that gift that you just gave. Danya, please jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. Because I know we're hearing a lot about how really sensitive this is to a lot of our communities, actually all of our communities. This type of topic is really sensitive, and kind of just speaking out from the community I serve and I represent. I think we also just need to keep a really open mind to some communities that we might not get feedback from. We might not get any input, and it's not because they don't want to give it or it's not intentional. It's because, number one, they don't know how to express the feedback, and number two, like, this topic is so sensitive and it goes so deep. Like, when you hear the word climate change and you translate or interpret it to the Chuukese language, one thing that comes to our mind is our islands under sea level, or you know what I mean, like the sea level rising and coming into our islands and us having to flee our home and being faced with barriers in a place that is so culturally different from our home. So sometimes, because we're facing so many barriers and we're in a place that we don't know how to communicate and express our feelings around things and to give feedback, sometimes is the last thing we know how to do. So I feel like when we're looking for this community engagement, and we're looking for this community feedback, sometimes it's not, it's there, but it can't be put into words or put onto paper, at least in that time frame. Sometimes it takes time. It takes time for a community to even get the courage to speak out or to even show up. And I think that's one thing that I just want to add, because I've been experiencing that a lot, where, I'm having to get engagement and do engagement and get feedback. And sometimes it's hard. It's a challenge, because I myself, I feel it, and I see it in the face of my community, where they tell me they have no words for what they're feeling. So I just wanted to put that out there to just to share. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Lika, I think, gave us some of that as well. And there are questions in some of the other tools around understanding how we may re-traumatize a community. And there's a couple other things that are just coming up for me, Danya, and you don't have to respond. Just, I think one of the things we'll have to think about and reflect on coming out of this conversation before we come back is, there's process questions around, how are we including or excluding populations or communities from a policy process? And sometimes that could be time of day or location, or it's too technical, some of those barriers, but also it could be the mechanism, right? So asking folks maybe to talk about an issue may not be the way to get that information from a community. And I think, Monica, some of the things you brought up around healing circles, or, art and movement and song and dance, right? There's other possible mechanisms around, like, how do we help folks find that courage that you talked about, Danya? And I'm not going to have an answer today. I don't think we have to come up with a question that neatly fits with what you just described. I'll just ask us all to hold it, because it's real, and you named it so powerfully. So I just thank you for just speaking to that experience. Anna?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback off Danya's words, because one of the things that I also seen in my undocumented community is the fact that, one, yes, we're traumatized. We might not know how to, say the words, but also a lot of my community, one, thinks that we don't have a voice or a vote because we can't do any, you know. And so for me, you know, wanting to get any type of words coming from our undocumented community, it's not just, you know, hard for them to come out and say these things, but a lot of times we do feel like we're gonna get criminalized for saying anything like that. So I again, echoing Dania's, I ask for a lot of patience because it does take a lot of time to empower folks that have been traumatized and have, you know, this country has taken so much from all of us. So yeah, that's all I got.
I appreciate it, and you all are sharing some really important barriers to understand, and part of why we ask how people are differently situated is to uncover some of this, right? As emotionally difficult as it can be to talk about the why. Again, trying to develop questions that will help us understand the experiences to such an extent that we can design policy, strategy, process, practice that does its best to incorporate and include those experiences as we think about policy. And, you know, part of y'all's opportunity, and I think part of the beauty of having an EJ coalition and some dollars in a budget to do engagement is that it's not, you know, they're not picking on you, Jenna, but it's not Jenna going out there and trying to have these conversations with the undocumented folks, right? Anna, it's your expertise and wisdom. It's your trust and relationship. And so I do think that, you know, you all get to hold this really complicated balance of, you know, recognizing and living and experiencing all of what, you know, you've already named, while also trying our collective best to say, how can we ensure that whether it's folks with intellectual developmental disabilities or their families, whether it's undocumented communities, whether it's Pacific Islanders, you name the population, that we're trying to consider their benefits and burdens as we do this work. And I don't have a solution for how we overcome that. But just wanting to make sure that we have a process and a tool that helps us name it, even if we continue to struggle with the barriers. Monica, I'm going to come back to you in a second. I want to ask, if we haven't heard from someone, I'd love to just ask folks if there's any reflection, if there's any other questions that you would want to bring in. Paris, I can't download your screenshot, but thank you for sharing it. But I'd love, if anyone hasn't contributed, I'd love to just create a little bit of space, and then Monica, I'll come back to you in the room. Okay, Monica, let's go to you, and then I'll ask folks again, and then I'll reflect back on some of what I've heard and see if there's anything missing. Monica?
Thank you. So in 2018 is when I became aware of the climate crisis, when I saw the video of Greta Thunberg saying she would never forgive us, the younger generation would never forgive us if we did nothing. And all we cared about was money. And I thought it was a movie, and I wanted it to be a movie. But I was in deep addiction at that time. The thing that stopped me to act was Aries, my kiddo. I was like, I can't, like, what kind of mother would I be if I just let this world burn and I did nothing, and I didn't try, and there was always people saying, well, it's never going to change, and this and this and that. There's always these things, obstacles, just on saying no, 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 and then I went and I found the meetings, and I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I had to learn what all these things meant, and it was so much work, and it was so scary, but I did it because I was like, I have to do this. It's a mother. I have to do this. But it was just so hard to figure out the words and keeping on going and getting into those meetings and then being like, oh my gosh, speaking to the city or county council, they're so much smarter than me, you know? And so I understand why it's hard for people to go and be like, what do I say? What do I do? You know? And then one of my friends said, speak from your story, speak what you have experienced. And that's when I opened up. And it's, for me, it's opening up about our own stories and our vulnerability and asking people what makes you cry, what makes you scared. Really keeping it simple so that people can get those emotions out. And then that's when the narrative, that's when what's inside you comes out. Because if you give people all these big words and everything, they're like, what the heck does that mean? And it scares them off. Because like these things are hard to break through. These tables weren't made for us. It's been, you know, hierarchy of human value and you know, and so just making it as simple as possible and really trying to reach emotional their emotional strings inside that need to come out and need to be felt. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. And I appreciate you modeling, right, the storytelling and the narrative and the vulnerability and the heart and the love, right? All you model that every time you bring yourself into space. And so thank you for doing that with us. Other thoughts, right? Really appreciate this conversation. I'll pause here and I'll do a little bit of reflecting back, but I'll just be quiet for a second if there's folks that want to come into the conversation. Well, let me just say thank you to start, right? This was really helpful. And part of my job, our project team's job is to kind of hear and process what you all are bringing forward and trying to connect it to how do we kind of build a structure that can be applied. And a lot of what I'm hearing is like the structures in and of itself could be problematic, right? So we'll just hold that reality. You know, I mentioned John Powell, you know, one of the things he likes to say is like, you know, doing equity work's not rocket science. It's a lot harder because of all of what you all brought into the room. Trying to develop policy that creates healing, trying to develop policy that responds to and acknowledges trauma and re-traumatization and historic harm and contextual and contemporary harm is hard. The emotion of trying to do this work in the context of all that is hard, right? People have real everyday ongoing barriers to engaging in this space, in this process, in these conversations, right? Like y'all have named why this work can be really difficult. And at the same time, right, how do we, in a process that ultimately will result in a set of policies that are going to impact every single human living thing, I guess, potentially some non-living things in Clark County, right? How do we know and focus in on that reality in a way that helps us not create more harm and helps us create more positive impact and benefit for all the folks that you all represent and are talking about and living through shared experience. So there's a few things that I heard, and what we will be doing is kind of taking this and coming back to you with a revised version based on this feedback, any other feedback that you choose to share between now and our next meeting. We should probably give you a date before like literally the next meeting, but to give us some feedback, because what I heard also loud and clear is that this conversation in and of itself is hard. So being able to sit and process in a space where you can feel like, okay, I can breathe, I can center myself, I can focus in, I can process what we've been shared, what this conversation is bringing up in my body, in my heart, my mind, is going to be really important. So please, this is not the end of this conversation. But I heard, very specifically, ensuring that fiscal and financial impacts are included in some of that consideration. I heard concepts of how can policy and strategy build capacity and the voice of communities and lead to healing and deeper trust, right? There's a lot in those phrases that I think we'll need to work with and try to bring something back. Certainly hear the language of trauma and healing and re-traumatization. We heard the language of historical context and the importance of doing this work informed by what we know of history. I've heard about data and whose stories and what narratives are actually informing this work as really important pieces. And then just recognizing that there are folks who will be potentially excluded from this process because of those realities. And I don't know how to capture that yet, right? But, either not having the language for it, not having the emotional capacity to be able to engage in a way that is not traumatizing, not feeling like you can engage because of any number of fears, right? So there's a lot there that you all shared. As I reflect back, I guess I would just ask you all, is there anything critical that you heard that I didn't just reflect back to you that you'd want to just name out loud before we kind of close up this part of our conversation? Okay. So we go a couple slides, I think. So as I've been saying, like, we're going to take this conversation, which I just, just sitting with y'all and just like, we're going to take a break in a minute. It's like taking our breath, collective breath. What a gift you all gave to each other. But as I've said, we're going to revise kind of those initial questions based on this conversation, and we'll come back with a more refined version based on the input you gave today, any input that comes subsequently after and outside of this meeting, and we'll bring it back to you in the next meeting. And then, Jenna, I did want to give you some space to talk about kind of the big picture around, like, not just why we're having this conversation here, but why this conversation is so critical to the broader process.
Yeah, so just to echo what's already been said, thank you all for sharing what you just shared. It's really, really powerful. So really appreciate that. So our hope is, so as Ben was saying, we'll bring back we'll think about what you said, see if we can think of some revisions to make to it, bring it back to the next meeting, look at it again. Our hope too is that at the next meeting, we can maybe test it too, like have some draft, like sample policies that we can run through to also help us refine again. So we'll take, it may take us a few rounds, right, of revisiting those questions, testing how they're working and seeing how we feel about how is this tool working essentially to help us evaluate and think through these policy ideas. So that's what we'd like to work on in the near term, but a few months down the road, while this equity tool is being developed, this project is moving fairly fast too, though. So there's a lot of, like, we are going to start drafting policy ideas and things like that. So by the summer, we hope to have a draft list of some kind of some resilience policies. So the idea is once we've got a draft list, we then want to run them all through those series of questions, right? To really evaluate them and think through how can we make these better, right? I mean, go through the series of questions, but ultimately, right, can we make these more equitable in some way? Is this actually just a terrible idea? Should we draft this off the list? Is this making us think of something, a policy we need to add? So it'll help us reflect on and view those policies through this equity lens. So our goal is to start working on that this summer with the resilience policies. And then we'll shift into focusing more on reducing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. So then we'll do the same thing again later on in the year once we have a draft list of those greenhouse gas reduction policies that we'll run them all through the tool. So I mean, working on this equity lens now is really setting us up. You know, it's gifting to the process a tool to use to help us evaluate policy ideas later. So we are just really appreciative of all your feedback to help us think through this. You know, this has never been done before, and definitely in the planning department at the county. You know, so this is, you know, this is totally new, and so just really appreciative of everything you all are sharing to help make this what it is.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna. So any questions for Jenna before we take a break and take a breath and regroup? Any questions about kind of the bigger picture process?
I have more things to share, but it was, I don't want to cut into our break time. So I will, I will for sure share them out.
Yeah, and there's other mechanisms, right? I mean, today was
Yeah.
the first conversation we're gonna have, and obviously, Monica, as we said earlier, you've been an expert at sharing, so you know, I think this will be a good moment for folks, right? Who, and particularly for those who didn't verbally contribute in this moment. I really will ask you all to kind of sit with this and share your thoughts electronically if you would. I think it's important that we hear from folks across the room. So with that, we can go to the next slide. This is our break. That was a heavy conversation. So let's take 10 minutes, do some deep breath exercises or whatever gets you regrounded, because we're going to be kind of shifting our process and going back into talking about some of the resilience goals brainstorm that the CAG did. So let's come back. I guess it'll be 5:12 if we take 10 minutes. I'll just note also, so folks, feel free to take a break. If you're on the public, just want to note, I know we had a hand up earlier. We are going to have public comment at 6:10. So just a reminder that we'll do an open. So let's take 10 minutes and we'll see you back then. I think I got time to eat a couple more Cheez-Its before we start again. Cheez-Its are my love language, I think, because what they might say. Okay, well, folks, we've finished talking, finished chewing before I talk. So if folks give a hand raise or a flash of the screen, something to know that you're back. Thumbs, if they have thumbs up. Yeah, I don't think you can. All right. Well, welcome back. We're going to move into conversation around the resilience. If folks remember Dana Hellman, who joined us at one of our previous meetings. Dana, I'm just going to pass it over to you to lead us through this next part of the conversation.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all again. I'm Dana Hellman with Kappa Strategies, and as Ben says, I'll be talking a bit now about the resilience sub-element and resilience goals. Quite a pivot from the conversation we were having before the break, but I hope this will be kind of enjoyable for folks because we get to actually think about, like, what can we do? What are our goals? What do we want to see happen here? So before we get into goals, though, I'm going to provide just a pretty brief, just a few slides, a recap about the resilience sub-element and what we've talked about in the past, because it's been a couple of months since we had our first meeting introducing some of this resilience content. So next slide, please. Okay. Really baseline reminder here just about what are we talking about when we're referring to climate resilience in this sub-element. We have a definition here from the Department of Commerce, which is resilience is the ongoing process of anticipating, preparing for, and adapting to changes in climate and minimizing negative impacts to our natural systems, infrastructure, and communities. A slightly more succinct way to think about that I like to use is just when we're thinking about resilience, we're really talking about opportunities to make communities more prepared and more able to bounce back from climate-related stress. And I'll just flag, Jenna actually already mentioned this, but we're only talking resilience today, especially once we get into this goal conversation that's coming up, but the greenhouse gas element goal conversation is to come later in the season here. So just want to make that clear in case folks are worried that we're not talking enough about emissions content today. Next slide, please. Okay. This will look familiar to those of you who were in the March 4th meeting, or if you happen to be in the last CAG meeting. We've really been talking about, up to this point, this step of exploring climate impacts. So trying to understand what are the hazards that are present in Clark County, who's impacted by them, how are they impacted, what effects does climate change possibly have on the communities and assets that we value. So we have this diagram on the right showing some of the prevalent climate hazards in the county. And just a reminder that we talked last time about how these interact with each other, because we often think about them in isolation, but they're really influencing one another in many cases and are related. Next slide, please. We also looked last time, we talked about this back in March about climate projections for Clark County. So you may remember seeing a lot of maps like this one. And these were showing projections for different climate indicators for the near term of 2020 to 2049 under a high emissions or business as usual scenario. So you got to have a look at, if things kind of continue as they've been going in terms of emissions, how might temperature and precipitation and other stressors look across the county in the near term? And then we had you also share some of your past experiences with different climate hazards, the impacts that you all had experienced personally or that you knew to have been experienced in the communities that you serve. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the list of 7 climate hazards that is more or less final. at this time. So these are the 7 hazards, climate hazards, that we're going to be kind of framing our future conversations around. And I do want to just, call out that I know that this list doesn't reflect all of the natural hazards that folks are concerned about for the county. However, these are hazards that we can really justify tying to climate change. So according to House Bill 1181, the legislation that's guiding this work, we have it quoted there in that blue box on the right. We're really meant here to address natural hazards that are created or aggravated by climate change. That's what we're thinking of as a climate hazard, and that's how this list came to be. So what we have on here is drought, which includes changes in the timing or amount of precipitation, extreme heat, flooding, which includes riverine, tidal and nuisance flooding, extreme precipitation and storms, especially focusing on rainstorms and wind, landslides, wildfire, and wildfire smoke. Next slide, please. Okay. So that's the end of the recap. Just wanted to get everyone back thinking about the big hazards of interest here. And we also talked in previous meetings about assets, so the things in your community that you value that could be impacted by climate change. And that was all wrapped up into this larger task of exploring climate impacts. So we're now moving into another step in the process here, which we've already started with the CAG, and we'll talk about that and then allow this group plenty of time to weigh in as well. We're moving into this next step called resilience goals and policies, developing resilience goals and policies. And at a high level, what we're really tasked with doing over the next several months is first developing a list of resilience goals for each of 11 sectors. And you may remember from our previous meetings, the Department of Commerce provided us with a list of 11 sectors. Those include things like agriculture, buildings and energy, water resources. And so that's just a framework that we're using to organize our thoughts and discussions. So we need to come up with a list of goals with the input of this group and others for each sector. And we'll actually share those sectors again a bit later in the meeting today. And then we need to identify at least one policy that goes with each goal. So one way to think about this is that your goals are the outcomes that you think would help build resilience, and the policies are the way to get to the goal. So the policies are a bit more action oriented. But I will say, I know, at least for me personally, and for many of us on the team, it can be a little difficult to distinguish between a goal and a policy. They often sound very similar. And so I have a couple examples here for you, but I will just say, when we start talking about goals, and we're really just talking about goals today, we're not getting into policies quite yet. We encourage you really to not get too hung up on worrying about, is it a goal or is it a policy? We just want ideas to flow. And that, you also don't have to worry about using standard plan language around goals and policies at this point. We can kind of help do some of that translation behind the scenes, but nevertheless, there are a couple of examples here that are pulled from an existing plan, the Clark County Comprehensive Plan, that are here for your reference, so you can at least get an idea of what all of this could look like at the end stage. So in the blue boxes there on the right, one example goal from the comp plan is protect and conserve environmentally critical areas. We could think of that as being part of the ecosystem sector. And a policy that the plan links with that goal is protect groundwater and surface water as a resource for drinking water, commerce, recreation, and for wildlife. And then the other one right below that, provide assistance for maintenance and rehabilitation of housing for Clark County residents. That's a goal that, again, if we're thinking about our sectors, we might attach that to the buildings and energy sector. And the policy that goes with that goal is encourage the creation of housing that is energy efficient, resource efficient, and has high indoor air quality. So that's just a look at what goals and policies could look like. However, I'll restate what we've already heard today from Jenna a little bit, which is that this is going to be an iterative, ongoing process. We're going to have input from this group. We have input from the CAG. We have countywide engagement happening, various technical reviewers weighing in. So this isn't set in stone right now. We're just, we're starting the process here, and you'll have many chances to revisit this. And we know that you have community engagement work that's currently ongoing, and you haven't yet gotten all of the results of that. So we want to give an opportunity for the things that you're hearing from your communities to inform this process as well. So we're going to be coming back to this repeatedly over the next 2 meetings at least, probably more than that. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, this is the bird's eye view, what's coming up, just to give you a sense of where we are and where we're headed with this process. So we've already done the upper left box there, brainstorm resilience goals with the CAG. That's what we'll be talking about today. As you can see in the second box there, we're going to be asking this group to review and expand on CAG goals. So more on that in a moment. And then after we hear your input today, we're going to take, CAPA's going to take everything we've heard from these 2 meetings as a starting point and look for ways to match the goals that you all have articulated to some existing policies. So we're going to just start with sort of the low-hanging fruit of what policies are already out there in plans that we can either adapt or adopt directly into our climate sub-element. So we'll work on that, and then CAPA is going to bring back a preliminary list of goals and policies to the CAG in the next CAG meeting later this month. And we'll start talking about gaps. So are there any goals that are not properly addressed by existing policies? And if so, we're then going to work on trying to fill those gaps, either by using new policy language or pulling from the menu of measures. And that's just a kind of a nice list of somewhat generic policy ideas provided by the Department of Commerce that we can again draw from and kind of adapt to our process here. We're going to come back to the EJC in your next meeting, as Jenna mentioned, with a full list of goals and policies, as far as we can get that list by your next meeting, and ask you to give it a review through the equity lens and let us know if we are doing what we need to be doing in terms of equity, if the goals and policies are reflecting the community feedback that you're hearing, and if there's any adjustments we need to make at that point. And then kind of ongoing over the next several months, even as we get into kind of joining resilience goals with greenhouse gas emissions goals, we're going to be having this conversation about how to prioritize different goals and policies. We might end up with a really robust list, but it could be more than we can actually use. And so we need to think about what criteria do we want to use to select priorities, and then make recommendations for what should ultimately end up in the comprehensive plan. So we'll be working on that, all of us, all of the stakeholders, all of the technical experts throughout the next several months. Okay, and I have a quote over here on the right. This is just, I think I'm kind of feeling like this is the North Star of this activity. This is also a quote from the Commerce Guidance, but I think it pretty nicely sums up the direction that we'd ask you all to keep in mind as you start thinking through resilience goals. And that is, think about equitable ways to build your community's connectivity, cohesion, and capacity to reduce, withstand, respond to, and recover from climate impacts. So just keep that maybe in your minds as, you know, this is kind of what we're working towards as we're thinking about goals today. And before I turn it back over for an activity, I just want to share a little bit more about what we did do with the CAG a couple of weeks ago when we met and where we are as of today with this content. Next slide, please. Okay. So in the CAG meeting, when we brought up the goals and policy conversation, and again, that was also just focused on talking about goals, really. We're not quite yet at the point of developing policy. But we shared this table with the CAG members. You all may have seen this. It was included in your meeting materials packet for today. If you don't have it handy, we'll share the link again for you in just a moment so you can have this to view virtually as you work through the upcoming activity here. But what this table shows in the left-hand column is the 11 sectors that I mentioned. These were the sectors provided by the Department of Commerce that we're looking to frame our goals and policies within. The second column shows key impacts, and that is meant to be a pretty easily digestible version to kind of show you, okay, like if we're thinking about the multitude of impacts that could happen within each sector, this is a condensed summary, essentially, to help you think about impacts in an easy way. And then we have an example resilience goal in the third column. So when we shared this with the CAG, we asked them to look specifically at those key impact statements and think about what goals they could come up with, what outcomes they could envision that would help build community resilience to these specific impacts. So that's what they were working off of. And then also, you know, that kind of North Star quote that I shared in the previous slide. And they came up with, I believe it was about 135 ideas. So we're not going to share all 135. It was a really fruitful conversation with lots of great ideas, including some policy ideas. But what I will share today, next slide, please, is just a summary. So the project team tried to combine, condense, summarize the many wonderful goal statements that came out of that CAG meeting into a few bullet points per sector here. So I'll go through these, we'll look at them together. And then what we're asking you all to do, just so you can have, we'll definitely share a link to that impacts table that was just on the previous slide, as well as the list of these resilience goals in just a minute once we begin the activity. So we'll just start by going through these together, and then you'll have some time to reflect on this content, the content in the table, and then we'll have a discussion and hopefully get some feedback from you all about just initial impressions of what you're seeing here. If it resonates, if you see any big gaps, we'll get into the instructions in a second, but just want to run through these quickly here. I think we can make up a few minutes of time also. So agriculture and food systems, some of the goals that came out of that were protect livestock food production, water, and soils, promote local food distribution and access to affordable, healthy food, and encourage use of heat and drought-resistant crops. So there we're looking at goals about maintaining food access and resources, but also doing some adaptive work by looking at crops that are adapted to future climate. Buildings and energy, we had goals promote renewable, innovative, and green energy. That includes a variety of suggestions that folks had for specific energy sources like solar and wind. Ensuring that the energy grid is resilient and backed up in case of a power outage. And then promoting access to heating and cooling, especially thinking about opportunities to do passive cooling so that we don't have to rely so heavily on air conditioning and electricity. Cultural resources and practices, our goals are to maintain community connections after a climate disaster, preserve culturally important sites, and protect native plants, species, and seeds. Economic development goals, prepare business owners for disasters and recovery, provide jobs close to housing, and build a circular economy. So one that doesn't produce so much waste, but where materials are reused and it's a more kind of closed loop economy. Next slide, please. For ecosystems, we heard some goals from the CAG about preserving open space, both rural and urban, keeping pollution generally out of our air and water, and fostering or maintaining ecosystem connectivity. For emergency management, we want to think about access to shelters, resources, and check-ins during emergencies. And this came up as particularly important for vulnerable populations or isolated populations who could really benefit from a check-in, especially. We want to think about how to promote self-reliance and community capacity to respond to emergencies. So there's a role for the county or cities to provide emergency relief, but also thinking about how to build up that capacity more locally among communities. and then having a good plan for different emergency situations, including specific climate emergencies that might emerge in the future. For health and well-being, we're talking about access to supportive services, things like childcare, healthcare, and shelters, really all the time, but especially making sure that continuity to those services is preserved during and after emergencies. Fostering access to healthy food and exercise programs, and promoting community risk awareness and knowledge of risk mitigation. So kind of on that capacity building piece again, making sure that people understand where risk exists and what they can do to mitigate their risk. For transportation, we heard goals about providing diverse transportation opportunities so that we don't need to rely so heavily on single occupancy vehicles, but that we have options like pedestrian routes, rail, and bicycle lanes, and building resilience of our local roadways overall. Next slide, please. For waste management, we want to think about supporting recycling and reuse of materials, and also making it a little easier to dispose of vegetative debris. That came up thinking about downed tree limbs and other debris that we see often after a storm. For water management, of course, we want to think about providing healthy and reliable sources of drinking water. And then also thinking about, a goal of stormwater infrastructure that can actually capture and handle the increased amounts of rainfall that we're projected to see in the future. And then our last sector here is zoning and development. So the goals that came up within that sector were about planning for kind of filling in the space we have, planning for dense development. So rather than sprawling out or increasing the urban growth boundary, we're thinking about how to fill in space and make the most of that. And that ties in really closely to planning for amenity-rich and service-rich communities where people have easy access to all sorts of different amenities. And then promoting affordable housing options in the long term for everyone. So next slide, please. Okay, so I guess I'll turn it over to you now, Ben, if you'd like to set us up for the activity. And
Sure.
if we haven't already, I think we'll get links in the chat for the, PDF of goals. Link is in the chat, and then we'll share the impacts table as well.
Yeah, that's great. So before I kind of give you directions, we are going to have discussions. So you got a little preview of the slides upcoming. Are there any questions around just the process? So I think part of this was regrounding you in kind of the earlier conversation, and then grounding you in the work that the community advisory group did to come up with what is on that PDF as a starting point. Any questions though for Dana about process to get to this place? Okay. Let's go to, let's preview the next slide. So, or discussion slide. Thank you for interpreting my bad direction. So we're going to create a little bit of space. So we're going to ask maybe for 5 minutes after I kind of outline our questions that we'd like you to think through. If you click on the link that Grant shared in the chat, which is, will take you to a document that has a list of basically what was on those slides and Dana just talked through. And as you sift through it and reflect on it, why don't you reflect on these 3 questions? So channeling the work that you do, the communities that you're working with and are from and of, what do you think of these initial goals? Anything you would add? Anything missing? This may be an opportunity also to be thinking about the conversation we just had, right? Starting to weave in some of those equity considerations as you think about goal language. So it's 5:35. I'm going to ask folks, you got the 2 links in the chat. Is anybody having a challenge accessing the links in the material? Okay. So with those, let's take 5 minutes. So now it's 5:36. Let's take 5 minutes, 5:41. And just with those questions in mind, work your way through those, particularly the goals. The impacts are helpful for context because that was like what inspired the goals. but really do want to have you focus on the goals through these questions. So let's come back at 5:41. So just take 5 minutes. I'll ask you if you need any more time, but let's take 5 minutes to start and work through the goal language and then these high-level questions. And again, as Dana said, this is one point in multiple points that you'll have intersection with this. So this is a just today exercise for now. Okay, so let's take 5 minutes and we'll come back. So we're right about at the 5-minute mark. Do folks want a little more time? Raise your hand if you want more time. Monica, okay, let's give 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes. Let's go 3 more minutes. Okay, let's bring us back. Like I said, this won't be the only time that we have for this conversation. So hopefully folks were able to, again, react in the moment to what you're seeing and experiencing. So I'll just open it up, and I'm going to particularly push folks that we haven't heard from yet today to jump into the conversation. So why don't I pause? Abby, please.
Hey, thank you. Also wanted to say thank you all for welcoming me here today. I'm excited to be here. But I was thinking, looking at the health and well-being area, and then also kind of in line with the preserving open spaces, I think having a goal of maintaining and conserving the wetlands and the wildlife refuges in the forested areas that already exist in the county is really important, just for maintaining as many natural green spaces as possible as it continues to grow. Thinking specifically about North County, like Ridgefield and La Center, that have so many spaces where they have access to so much nature, like right within where suburban areas are, but it's also growing incredibly quickly. And then I also just wanted to bring up that just kind of connecting that the environment with our health, from looking at the maps of the county and which regions are having the worst health outcomes in our women's health study. It looks like there might be some connections I'm starting to see about where disadvantaged populations who may be having worse health outcomes are also having less access to safe spaces to be outdoors, which we know is so good for our mental and physical health. So that stood out to me as one thing right away.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Abby. Others, again, I'll encourage those who haven't offered today to come in. Trish, jump in.
Can you see me?
We can see you, we can hear you. It's all good.
Sorry, my internet where I am kicks me off the meeting every 15 minutes or so. So every time I relog in, I have to remute and recover everything. And then, yeah, it's a little bit of a process, but okay, I have a couple of things I want to touch on. When you were just mentioning about having open spaces, I'd really love to see some data on where those open spaces currently have a majority of policy, I guess, or like where are the most open spaces, and how can we incorporate that? Like how Ridgefield and the center has quite a few. Can we incorporate that there is that designation increase in other parts of the county? Also, can we talk more about like what is a good climate resiliency number of open space that would be helpful in a moving forward for impacting climate resiliency and developing a like required amount. And then when we go into development, one of the things when we're adding more development in the county, maybe also talking about increasing that required open space when someone develops property into land usable housing and things like that, having open spaces so that people who end up living in those houses have access to community gardens and the ability to be more sustainable in their individual urban spaces. In the realm of farming things, the water management policies would be great that increase water usage for agriculture, programs that help farmers to harvest rainwater and use rainwater and support infrastructure in that way. There are not a lot of grant programs that help incentivize better use of land and water. Educational assistance that can be available for climate resiliency policies that we put in place would be nice. I just didn't see a whole lot of additional resiliency goals as far as education opportunities. Protecting native plant species and seeds was a nice goal to see, but maybe having access to public listings of what these are so that when people have land as well, there can be more ability for landowners to also plant more native seeds. There's a couple of things I'm thinking of, but I don't like to ramble for too long. Just more into the farmland preservation. Let me see really quick on the slide so I can make sure I'm noting what I wanted to note with. When it says improving land access and land protection as the example, it should also say to support future local food systems. Like supporting what we currently have is really important, but also supporting access to continuing and future systems would be a great resiliency addition. I think there's a real lack of
Tricia, you might have froze on us. I think we lost Trish to internet. Trish, we'll come back to you if you can hear us. Let's go Paris, Josh, Laura, and then if Trish comes back from internet freezing, we'll go Paris.
Hi, I'll try to make my comments brief. Let's see here. For the first goal, a thought for an addition or revision would be to specifically call out the addressing food deserts. I know that there are areas in our community where food deserts mostly impact BIPOC folks, so like literal access to points of sale where they can buy those local foods and bits that you were talking about in your goals, and then a call to explicitly support BIPOC farmers in that goal element as well. For buildings and energy, I'd like some language around energy justice. It kind of nods towards it, but specifically for low-income households to fund sustainable solutions to address energy poverty in our community. I think language around that would be really helpful. For cultural resources and practices, I wanted to note, this is more so for the disaster response, but to ensure that emergency responding teams are trained to be culturally competent as they respond to BIPOC or communities. And then in addition to cultural practices and resources, I think that something that's really cool is a model that we're starting to see out of California between the Redwoods League, the Yurok tribe, and the National Park Service, where they're partnering with tribes to help to work with them to manage those lands and indigenous via indigenous practices. And I think a similar goal for support of indigenous practices, preservation of those sacred lands, we could collaboratively work with our tribal partners and be another nationwide leader here locally. And that's something I think would be really cool. Language accessibility for all the things, obviously. And then I don't see, other than like in some of the examples, I don't see air quality explicitly named here. And I was thinking under health and well-being, climate-related health risks, seeing something named as asthma, but I'm really concerned about the impacts of the water treatment that goes on in Fruit Valley and the things that are burned to get rid of the wastes that have come from our water treatment or put into the airs of largely a BIPOC population over there. So I'd like to see us have a goal explicitly to modernize our water treatment processes so that they don't create, dirty air for communities of color in particular. So just some of the things I was noting, and I'll follow up with email or something if I have more thoughts. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Paris. Let's go Josh, Laura, Monica, and then Trish, let's come back to you. Josh?
I think overall it's a great list of goals. My only concern is that I think a lot of these are very ambiguously tangible. And so I worry as far as goals are concerned that, it's great to put these down to state these, but what can we do from an action standpoint to, achieve building a circular economy within the realm, the context of this conversation? I look down at, transportation says building resilience of roadways and reducing emissions, and all great goals to have, of course. Just, I worry about the specificity and measurability of those goals. One of the things that I wanted to add that I didn't see outlined really specifically here was, urban like tree cover and canopy as a heat reduction tool. So ecosystems talked a little bit about, open space and maintaining ecosystem connectivity, but I think evidence has proven that that is the most effective way to reduce extreme heat within what is typically highly populated urban lower income areas that are less likely to have a lot of that tree cover. And I think that that's something that could be achievable as far as a goal approach.
Right. That's great. Thank you, Josh. And I forget who, Dane, I think you're the first person that named circular economies. Do you want to give a definition of how it was at least understood at the CAG versus a Google definition? Maybe how were folks talking about kind of the life cycle of materials, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I might want to pivot this to Monica, because Monica, this was one of your suggestions that came through an email. So we actually didn't talk too extensively about that in the CAG, but it does feed in nicely to this idea of just like less waste, more reuse, more recycling, and trying to keep things in play longer. But Monica, do you want to say anything about that?
I do. I have it written down right here. It's a part of the Donut Economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist book. So systems need to be designed according to regenerative and circular principles that mimic nature's self-sustaining nutrient cycles, where biological minerals like food and wood naturally flow in ecological loops, producing no waste. Technical materials continue circulating through reuse, repair, and upcycling to maximize their usage, powered by renewable energy. And all materials are conceptually considered valuable resources held in batteries to be protected, stored, and effectively used through perpetual cycling in order to restore humanity's relationship with the living world and achieve balance within Earth's life-supporting systems. And so it's just, nothing, it gets thrown away. Nothing just like we throw it in the garbage and it's like, oh, it's gone, it's fine. No, it's somewhere. It goes somewhere. And so this is like, we use everything and we try to waste less and buy less and really only get the things that we need or get something that's used so that we don't continue having the machine, make more products that use fossil fuels to, make. So yeah, that was that.
Good, thanks, Monica. And I know that wasn't your hand up answer, so let's go Laura, and then Monica, and then Gabriella.
Yeah, hi. I think I was, looking at the goals, that I thought would be most applicable to folks who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness and also sheltered homelessness. And so immediately going to the emergency management section, I think that all of those suggestions there are really important, especially having a plan. I did see in the chat the suggestion about hyper local neighborhood emergency hubs, and I think that can also be applied. And health and well-being, providing access to supportive services, I think is really important and impactful on that community. And I think that, the transportation piece, I would like to add something in there under the diverse transportation opportunities, thinking about people who, don't have access to personal vehicles, or even, the ability to walk, long distances or ride bicycles. So thinking about physical ability as well, diverse transportation in terms of physical ability. And let's see, I think Paris mentioned, and I would just like to agree strongly with climate, energy justice, I think is how you put it, Paris, in terms of people who have recently been homeless, who are living in permanent supportive housing and like Vancouver Housing Authority properties. Access to cooling is vitally important. And, landlords, this is a justice issue there, and they're not all able to just go out and buy an air conditioning, unit to have installed. So that's, I think we all know that extreme heat is very difficult on people that are place bound in housing. So I think plugging that somewhere within these goals, I think would be really important too. So I think that's what I had to add.
Good, thank you, Laura. Monica, then Gabriella.
Okay, awesome. So using goats for wildfire prevention is an innovative and effective approach. Goats are natural grazers and can reduce the fuel load in fire-prone areas. By eating dry vegetation, they can access difficult terrains and create fire breaks. Goats also promote the growth of native plants, reducing the dominance of invasive species. However, proper management and supervision are necessary. Overall, using goats for wildfire prevention is a sustainable and viable strategy in areas where other methods are limited. And so that would mean we need to train people to be goat people and take care of the goats. So that'd be a great opportunity for job creation. And then next is biochar. Biochar is a carbon-rich substance produced through the it's PYROLYSIS, which I'm like, what? And I looked that up, and that is a chemical process in which organic materials are heated in the absence of oxygen of organic materials. It has benefits such as improving soil fertility, sequestering carbon, and serving as a renewable energy source. Sustainable production and use of biochar are important considerations. And then for the affordable housing, promote affordable housing options, I have to say we need to promote actual affordable housing. That word, affordable housing, it gets lost. There is no actual affordable housing right now. I know people are paying way more than 30% of their income. And people cannot be I had this conversation where if I didn't have a home, I couldn't be an activist. I couldn't be out there doing these things that I need to do. And so the stress, I'm always like, how am I supposed to figure out rent? How am I going to put food on the table? Like, that is a stress in itself. And so then you're asking people to come out and do more. I mean, I think there needs to be some policies in there where we're like, okay, no, we need actual affordable housing or rent reduction or community owned units and spaces. Also, okay, going to the list, Minnesota is paying homeowners to replace their lawns with bee-friendly wild flowers, clover, and native grasses. We can do that with property managers. We can do that maybe with businesses saying, hey, we'll pay you if you rewild your area. Also, if we each grow a large crop of different food, like let's say a community grows a different large crop of food, we can all trade with each other. Each, community, like the Bagley Downs or, Shumway or whatever is growing certain crops of food. And let's say another community is growing another one, and then we just share. We just share it. So practically we could eat for free. Planting fruit trees everywhere to feed everyone and the homeless, so everyone can have something that is very I just gave a man $10 the other day, and he was like, I'm gonna go eat, and this is the first thing I've eaten all day. And I was like, we need to be able to feed our people if we want to have a healthy community. And right here it says protect livestock. I added protect and add livestock. Like cow urine is amazing for crops. They do it over in India. They have actually, they have cows, going all around just peeing everywhere, and it actually creates more yield for the food. And then native grasses and flowering perennials can sequester more CO2 than turf grass. Also over in India, they have created trenches, like mile-long trenches that they built with community effort that, and dug underneath where the rain came back. So that's also going in line with, gathering rainwater. Provide access to supportive services like childcare. I put provide access to actual affordable childcare, healthcare, and shelters. And then transportation. We need more buses. We need a train like the MAX or something. We need to make it so easy and so reliable, and that you're like, oh my gosh, like the bus is actually here. Now I can go to where it needs, and they need to go to where we want to go, because people sometimes walk a really long time to get there where they need to be. And then the weekend is absolutely horrible. You have to wait like an hour for a bus. Waste management. We need to talk about composting our poop. I know it's like a subject, but I mean, there's nutrients, there's things, and we need to have that conversation about it. Also for waste management, I know that the plastic spoons and the styrofoam and everything is so much. We need to have biodegradable, either bamboo, avocado spoons, forks, utensils. Also, there's a new thing of packaging that's made with mushrooms, the styrofoam mushroom thing for, let's say you go out to a restaurant, now you have a mushroom styrofoam thing. And then some apartments can't have planters hanging from their window, because I tried to give out some plants yesterday, and they said, I'm sorry, we can't, because our apartment is not allowing us to put plants outside of our windows. And so I think that's a part of the zoning. So that is it for now.
Thank you, Monica. Gabriella.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for sharing, everybody else that has shared so far. And in that CAG meeting, since part of that, we talk about different options for reducing pollution. And yes, we talk about water treatment, and which was the other comment that, I don't know, who mentioned, I think Paris, so water treatment and the air quality, things like that. And so actually, I have some things to share for talking to the youngest generation about these issues, to see how much they are involved in preserving our environment and reducing green gas and emission and better the environment. So actually I had a very in-depth conversation with my 22-year-old. And little that I knew, he started to talk about the use of moss on lawns instead of grass. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, as when I was a homeowner, not too long ago, I was fighting to get the moss off my land. And this is because of the lack of knowledge about what moss does for our environment. So I think, yes, the education for how to improve our environment and what we can do, like sometimes we see this natural gardens in our neighborhoods, and maybe promote the people to grow moss instead of grass in their lands, because so what I found out is that the moss absorbs more carbon than 275 mature trees, and they absorb less water, obviously, than grass and trees, and they produce a lot of oxygen. And I was like, okay. I was actually impressed, and I wasn't surprised. My son is very smart. And also, I found out about uranium fuel pellets. I don't know how far we can go into this, but I know that 1/2 inch of a diameter in height contains more energy than a ton of coal and 149 gallons of oil, or 17 tons of cubic feet of natural gas. And there are hydrogen cars, and there are so many other things that we can look at reducing those greenhouse gas emissions and mitigating the effects of the harmful weather, air pollution, and just to better the environment and help with the economy, because we need things that are reliable, that they don't use a lot of water, because we see that there is a lot of, if we need to use a lot of water for the grass and it's not producing enough clean air, then go with a more reliable option. So it's a matter of, in my eyes, about getting informed and educating people about the options they can do, and see what else we can come up with and promote that is cost effective and clean for our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriela. Well, this was great, y'all, and a preview, I think, of some deeper conversations that we'll be able to have. I'll lift up some things as we kind of close this part of our agenda. There's a number of comments in the chat that I just want to bring into the room. One, I think education was talked about in a couple different ways. Tavi naming, both a question and I think, likely a comment around the resources to educate communities who currently don't understand, and yet, there's this expectation, as we talked about earlier, around how are they going to engage, and doing so without overburdening folks, right? So how do we kind of build the capacity in communities to engage around these issues? Lika, the hyper-local neighborhood, I think several folks spoke to that, the neighborhood emergency hub, and of course, defining what does that look like and whatnot as part of future discussions. Trish also named, building off the conversation around affordable housing, and what that means, quite affordable, and defining that in real terms, as a reflection of cost value. Lika lifting up natural swamp system to clean sewage, kind of building off some of the benefits of natural environments, doing natural environment things that help with whether it's carbon sequestration or other things, as Gabriela was talking about. Naming the spaces and places, not just open spaces, but spaces that have amenities and space for, Monica's comment, kiddos to play. Not man-made, but natural spaces that are conducive to that. Jude, I think, lifting up some of the gaps in these goals, particularly around ecosystem connectivity, both in open and natural spaces. and food forests. So kind of the antidote to food deserts, building food forests in urban areas, and a reference to work they're doing in Atlanta. And then lastly, recognizing the value of bamboo farms, both for sequestration, but also for material production. Earthship homes. I'm not even going to ask for that because it's 6:12, Monica. That might be a side conversation. You said some follow-ups on that piece. So I'm going to close us because I want to open it up if we go to the slide. But thank you all. That was a really great conversation and one that will be continued. If we can go to the slide for public comment. Or next steps, right? So I don't know if this is me or we're just going to keep incorporating kind of the feedback here. Dana showed the slide around process, right? CAG had this conversation. You all have added to it. We're going to incorporate that. It'll kind of be on that iterative kind of cycle of input, refinement, and moving the work forward. So now I do want to open it up. If we can go to the next slide for public comment. Looks like Violet, I'm hoping that's a public comment hand because then you're doing some good modeling for our other folks in the public. So we ask you to raise your hand. We're going to promote you to a panelist. You'll have up to 3 minutes to provide some input to this group. We would like to say your name, focus on substance, be respectful. We are hoping that your comments are relative to our agenda, or at least the issue broadly, and you can also provide written comments. So if it's Violet, let's promote you. Do I see you here?
Hi.
Is it Violet?
Yes, it is.
Well,
Thank
please.
you.
Yep, jump in, introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. I'm so proud of everybody here. I want to give a special shout out to Jenna, who has provided amazing visionary leadership to the most recent planning commission meeting in the last couple of days. I take note that the seated Clark County commissioners, as far as the eye can see, are all white male. Over the age of 50. And so I appreciate having women in leadership in such a strong role of providing role modeling for, public participation. So my name is Violet. I am president of Synoptic, and Synoptic is Washington State's first OMBWE certified, dedicated facilitation, which means just the thing, for industrial symbiosis circular economies key sector. So we have both a wrap in progress with L&I and a virtual pre-apprenticeship program. And I wanted to just make a comment to what Josh was saying, and also just in general. The reason that I'm doing what I'm doing in Washington State is because the Washington State Department of Commerce and the legislation is rich with very visionary leadership, compassionate, and professional cohort. And I want to let everybody here know that Washington State Department of Commerce and the legislations provide a lot of true, authenticated, credible, and legitimate guidance for the things that you're doing. For instance, Synoptic is platformed by 10 era-defining legislations. So the industrial symbiosis, I'll rattle off a few. It's just RCW 4331-625. We do, and 635 for the grant making. So in 2017, Governor Inslee took state legislators convening over to Denmark actually to see how IS was performed over there, and came back and legislation was born. We now have for Choose Washington a circular economy development director. We also have in Washington State Department of Commerce workforce innovation. I can tell you by lived experience, I'm a retiring street minister of more than 20 years. I've lived in a car, I've gotten the thing done. And I want to let you know that it is not easy to work with labor and industries around apprenticeship program, anything. Most of them are very, if you will, older paradigmatic, patriarchal, white male dominated military industrial complexes. The conversation that they want to have is, where's your employers, who's your partner, where's your money coming from? The conversation I want to have is like this: how are our communities actually being centered with job creation for data justice, et cetera, et cetera? So it's highly relevant to have the conversation around green economy jobs, circular economy jobs. For instance, we got 4 tracks for our journey for certification. And the first track is actually community resiliency. It's circular availability resource, microgrid modernization. So we're talking about teaching everything from biomass production as a primary occupation and then a subset of everything else.
Violet, Violet, I'm gonna have to cut you off at your 3 minutes. So if you want to do one more sentence, and then we'll.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So I just want to say that you don't have to overwork when the legislation is there, when the subject matter expertise is there, and the departments are there to help you with what you're doing. So we're at synoptic.online if anybody wants to do what we're doing. And again, thank you so much for this platform. Really grateful for all of you and what you do in the communities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It always feels rude to cut you off, but trying to keep it fair for the process. I appreciate
Absolutely. And I got a lot of information, so thanks.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Violet. And I know if it's Madeline or Madeline, you had a hand up earlier, but I don't see it anymore. But I'll do a last call for public comment for those in the audience. Okay, not seeing any. Thanks for Violet to bring, and for folks that are still in the audience, feel free to contribute at any time. We'll create the space at every one of our meetings. So we can go to the next slide. Wrap up and next steps. We're at that time. I think we can go next slide. Jenna, do you want to hit on this piece since you're...
Sure. Yeah, so I will be double checking who still needs the Open Public Meetings Act training, and I'll follow up with you by email to let you know if we're still expecting you to do that and resend the link to you. You can also expect within the next week, we'll send out some additional public engagement questions for your consideration. We'll give you a due date to provide any initial feedback, knowing there'll be other opportunities to follow. Don't forget to send us your invoices so you can get paid. I think those are our 3 main things here.
Thank you. And then Madeline gave us an inadvertent hand raise, but to have the appreciation for the work that y'all are doing. The only other thing I would ask, I don't know if we have a date or a turnaround for EJC feedback, but I guess I would just encourage folks as soon as possible, maybe the next 2 weeks, week and a half. I don't know. I'm looking around the team. I'm like, whatever's fair, but try to get it as soon as possible to us so we can incorporate it and come back to you at our next meeting with revisions. I think the same thing for the conversation we had around resilience. The sooner you can get any additional thoughts, reflections, or comments to us, to Dana and her team that's trying to put all of this together and continue to revise and iterate as we do our work going forward. And then is there a next slide? I closed my notes, so who knows what's happening. All right, well, we're going to meet Monday, June 3rd, same time and place. As always, we'll have materials on the webpage. It's a good way to track the information and the work that we're doing. And then as hopefully you've learned by now, invoicing, work plans, reach out to Lauren, Amy, Jenna, all other questions, give or take. I think most other questions, at least to myself, Nicole, and we can make sure we're tracking those and getting them to the right places. If we go next slide. Thank you. This was I say this all the time. It's a real privilege to be able to share this space. In particular, I'm really always grateful for the work that I get to do, especially when it's with folks like you all who are just bringing so much of yourselves and so much of your expertise and the full emotion of what it means to be a human doing this work. And so I just appreciate you all immensely and look forward to our next time together. Jenna, is there anything that I missed that we wanted to close with?
No, I think you've covered it. Besides just another thank you. Just really appreciate this, and I'm feel very privileged to be able to sit in the room and listen to you all share. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, with that, it's 6:22. You got 8 minutes back in your scheduled life here. So appreciate everyone. Much love. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, take
See you
care.
next time.